Hey, hoes, welcome back for another episode of Hoeology Podcast. This is your host, Destiny, and today I'm joined by the fly duo, Sherry and Ruben, and we're going to be talking about sex exploring and how to just deal with kind of changing it up in your relationships. People like to say keeping it spicy, but we'll get into that. Do you guys want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Do you want to go or?
Oh, I'll let you do
Okay.
it.
I'm Ruben, and that's Sherry. We our nickname, affectionately known as Fly Duo. We run a brand agency called Fly Me Productions. We also have another project called SexTech and Chill, and it's really built around folks who are interested in a journey of sex exploration. We call it a digital sexual wellness platform or a motherfucking wellness platform, if you're spicy. And it's for folks who are just interested in things around sexual exploration. And it really was built kind of like as an homage to like our own journey through sexuality and the stuff that kind of helped us as a couple, and all the things we learned, how much it helped us. We figured we'd turn around and try to share a lot of that. And hopefully it helps other folks, whether you're married or not married. Hopefully there's something in there that will resonate. And that's really our background in a nutshell. Really quick version.
I'll make sure to link all of your websites and social media in our show notes. But y'all have been together over 20 years, right?
Yeah. It's gonna be
29 in December.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh. Well,
been about it.
congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's
it's been a
exciting.
minute.
I've only been married for 2 years, but yeah, it's already been a journey.
No,
So
see, that's dope though. Like, yeah,
Congratulations.
exactly.
thank you.
Congratulations.
You're starting a new journey.
Yeah, yeah, I'm getting there. So I'm sure with as long as you guys have been together, you've obviously come into a space where you wanted to have kind of like that conversation of, I want to try something new or I want to, look into something else. So how did you kind of first deal with those emotions of like wanting to try something, and then how did you decide individually to have that conversation with your partner?
That is a good question.
I'll let you start since you started this whole thing.
Okay. Well, it's a long story. Settle in, young
We'll
folks.
try to
No,
make
I'm
it
just
short.
kidding.
We'll try to make it short.
Yeah,
I was like,
totally
we
fine.
need to get coaching to figure out how to make our super long story, super short, and then let people ask questions. Okay, we'll try.
Yeah, basically for us, we come at it from an interesting like background, because we both started out in the church, didn't have a lot of like, it wasn't a sex positive experience for really either of us in that way. So that kind of like presented a lot of challenge when we first got married. So through navigating all those challenges, and I did everything like reading everything. I talked to I talked to a lot of different married folks I knew, talked to people I worked with, talked to actually a couple of therapists about it, because the church kind of like said, you like sex too much and all that, all the
Mhm.
things like you're pathologized around it and all of that. But at a certain point, like I just started, I like kind of like had, it went kind of like in spurts. Like I was interested, learn all the things, but then I had a lot of shame and I was getting a lot of negative feedback. So then I'd like pause and wouldn't explore and learn more and all of that. And most of it was just like reading and documentaries and all that kind of stuff, because this is before podcasting and all that kind of stuff. But finally, like I kind of reached a point, and for me, I hit a crossroads where I had to also come to grips with my own like faith and background, because those two things were butting heads. And in our instance, I know not with everybody with religion, but for me it was. So I had to go through a whole deconstruction journey of my like relationship with the church, with God, and all of that kind of stuff. Once I worked through all that stuff, then I went back a little bit more centrally focused on the sexuality stuff. And then I started bringing as much as I could of what I was learning to Sherry. First, like in small amounts, and like, I learned this, I listened to this, I watched this, what do you think of this? And most of it, again, was more like therapists and anthropologists and researchers. It was like it was really like dry, kind of like academic stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't like the spicy stuff at all, per se.
You
So
had to tread lightly.
yeah. So that's how it started for me. And then I'll hand it off to you and you can kind of share your
Yeah. So for
perspective
me,
on it.
yeah. So I'm trying to think. Yeah, I don't think like we really started exploring anything while we were in the religion. Like you
A
tried
little
to,
bit.
but like what you could, and then once we got out of it, I was still just kind of like in this like lane of just doing and not realizing that I had any kind of choice of anything different until I started seeing him like exploring stuff and learning new things and bringing new things, and then it was like, okay, he's changing, he's doing stuff, that some stuff I like really liked and appreciated, and then other things would really piss me off, and I was like, what are you doing, like what are you trying to do to us, what's happening, you know?
Yeah, yeah, like
And
dealing with the change.
yeah, ultimately we got to a place where I think we're going like in different directions. I was stuck and didn't really realize I was stuck, and he was growing and progressing, and we almost parted ways. And it was actually
Wow.
that almost parting ways that brought us closer than we ever have been. Because like we've always been like the best of friends, but the sexuality stuff was always an issue for us. And then so getting out of the religion where we actually had freedom to do stuff and explore and all that kind of stuff, kind of brought us to a head. And but we both decided like we want each other, we want to be together. So um I guess we just decided we were gonna just start trying things together, and what do we want to do, what do we always think about doing, and see where it would take us, because we were already at worst case scenario. Like one of my things was I was afraid to do anything because I was afraid it would break up our marriage, because like the way we were raised, you literally are not allowed to do anything. I mean, you are not allowed to date without the intent of marriage. You don't have sex until you're married. It's masturbation is wrong, like all of that.
Yeah.
So wanting to do anything was like a threat, you know? And I was the one who was like, gotta protect us fiercely, not realizing I was fucking everything up, you know? So we were already at worst case scenario, it couldn't get any worse. So we started slowly but surely dipping into different things that, you know, interested us. And ultimately it was hard at first, like a lot of hardness, a lot of tears and all that stuff, but it got better, and it continues to get better.
Yeah.
That's like
So
the
what
long
was kind
short.
of oh, you're fine. What was the kind of moment, I guess, for you, Ruben, where you were like exposed, I guess, to something like lifestyle like, or like kind of just outside of what you were taught? Like how did you kind of discover?
So for me, it was interesting because when I was in high school, I used to work with, like, I worked in maintenance and janitorial and all that. So most of the people I worked with were all like full on grown adults. So
Mhm.
one of the guys I used to work with, he was like, and this is going back to the very early 90s. So the naming was different and all that. And I don't know that he called it anything, but he kind of like, he liked me as a person. I really liked him. He's really cool. But at the same time, his like freeness and openness with sexuality was like triggered all my things religious, like guards and whistles and alarms and stuff. So he was always trying to get me to look at things differently. And he was always like, because I remember, I'll still never forget, I said something to him. He's like, dude, don't be trying to tell me anything about sex when you ain't even like had sex. Like, he's like, you like, you telling me stuff you know nothing about, and all you know about is what your preachers are telling you. He's like, he's like, I ain't trying to lead you wrong, but I'll respect you, but pump the brakes on not having practical application in something. So like that always resonated with me. But I think he was one of the earliest people who kind of like challenged some of my stuff. I mean, probably some people earlier than him, but I think that's one of the most noteworthy worthy ones. And I was probably like, I don't know, 18, 19, something like that. Somewhere between 17 and 19, I can't remember. And he was like, almost 40 or 40 years old. So he was, at that point, he was significantly older than I was. So that had a pretty significant impact on me. I don't remember your question. So what, beyond that, I think, I don't know. I was interested in everything. Like, I'm just naturally curious. So like,
Mhm.
I kind of like anything that speaks to me. I like just kind of learn and explore it. So like I would just see stuff, and then like I remember seeing something with Anne Rice on PBS, and I totally latched onto it. And I was like watching this whole thing, and um, I'm really dating myself, Dr. Ruth and people like that. And then when I would learn like the background of like civil rights people, and like you hear a little bit of like sexuality in their history, and that always intrigued me. Everything from like, you know, the experience with Dr. King, and having an affair with someone, and I was just like, that totally opened up my eyes in that area. But then, you know, I don't know, just a lot of things like that. I don't know if there's any one pivotal stuff thing,
Yeah.
but I know like early on, Sherry and I tried exploring some and doing different things, but the church kind of put the quash on that pretty quickly. So we kind of like for a minute that went pretty dormant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's like even though you guys are unique, obviously, in your story, I think the principle of it all is kind of like relatable to everyone because when you're growing up, unless you have a parent that's already like into that lifestyle or into something that's non-traditional, you kind of just do as you're told and you don't question it. Or if you do, you kind of just think like I'm doing this because someone told me that it's right. So you don't really want to question it because it's worked all this time, but once you are exposed, I think it kind of like opens your eyes. And then, especially in this industry, you're like, oh my gosh, it's a whole network. And like the person next to you could be like a Dom and you have no idea because they live this like crazy life. And it's like, it's awesome. It's just so much. I think it's fun. But yeah, I think we can all relate to just having that limited mindset initially. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it is definitely, it definitely opens up kind of like your mind to opportunity and all. I think for us, like we look at it like, okay, we rebuilt a new marriage the way we wanted it. I think that was one of the things, because the concept of what marriage was for us coming up was so, very specific, very much in a specific set of restrictions. And then we realized we can do whatever we want. We can make marriage
Right.
look
Yeah.
the way it wants. So we kind of look at it like, okay, we built a new marriage together, and it's a new phase in life. And that was a really freeing, liberating thing. It's kind of like when you realize you can just make it whatever you want, regardless of what you see on TV or what a therapist might tell you or what other people might tell you. It's literally like your options are whatever you want them to be, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we love learning all about all the different kinds of lifestyles and relationships and all of the things. So we can just like, it feels like a menu, like
Yeah.
what can we take from that sounds good to us, And
Yeah.
you don't. It's not like, oh, you're learning all about this one way of life, and if you have to do that thing or this thing, like it's not boxes. You can literally create your own box and pick and choose pieces from different ways of doing things and make your own relationship. That's been one of the best parts, one of the funnest parts.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that helped me early on too. Because while we're not like living a poly life or anything like that, like we pulled a lot of dope shit out of the polyamorous community, out of the wider non-monogamy community. We learned a lot of like their approaches and tools and tactics, everything from like how they do agreements, and we created our own agreement and then revised it over time and all that kind of stuff. Like I feel like, and I've always felt like there's something you can learn from almost anything and everybody. So
Yeah.
we like, that's one of the things, like try to open up our mind, explore all the things and all the things, what they have to offer. And we just learned a lot along the way and kind of just pull from here and pull from here. We figure like if they can make things like, jealousy and communication work with multiple partners, they've got to have a lot of tools in there that we can use to work with like the two of us. And that has been really, really smart. I think like looking back in hindsight, that was like one of the smartest things we could have done, was be willing to take a lot from that. And I still kind of take that. Like there's a lot of things I might not be part of, but I think that there's things in there if you just pay attention and listen. There's just a lot of things you can learn, and I appreciate that a lot, especially because the right people have been super open and willing to share and all that. So we've been like, yeah, we're willing to learn. So that works for
Yeah.
us.
I think that's one of like my favorite things about working in this industry, and especially getting to talk to people like such as yourself is everyone's pretty open and like the resources are there. So even if, like you said, you're not taking 100% of the concept, you're taking like a bit and a piece here and like making it essentially work for your relationship or your marriage, like people are pretty much open. So it's great. So you kind of mentioned that you were reading and kind of just like getting more familiar with like just different items and different things, different ideas. So how did you approach that conversation? Like what was, I guess, what was that conversation like? Like when you were like, okay, I can't take this anymore, like I need to tell her what's up. Like
That's see, and I wish we had. That's one thing I would say to anybody. Like, if you're starting a journey out, document everything, because I don't.
yeah.
Early on, I didn't document enough of the like like the conversation, all that between us. I documented what I was learning, but not as much as like how that was working between us. I wish I had. So I don't know initially what I said because I can't remember. I know that like at one point we had a really like we had a profound conflict. Let me put it that way. We're passionate in love and we're passionate in conflict as well. So I think those two
Amen. That's
things
marriage.
go hand in hand. Yeah, exactly. So like we love hard, we can fight hard too. But we also learned how to better fight as well, which is I think important as well. Like we're fighting as much as we might have conflict about what each of us might feel, we're also really hard fighting for us too. And I think that's the important
Hmm.
thing. Like we're fighting for us, fighting for our relationship and everything. What was I
Well,
saying?
and a
Oh,
lot of it is now like fighting for our own autonomy, our own advocating for our own selves, which we didn't do a lot of early on. So now it's like we're fighting for ourselves and then we have to fight for each other, like fight for the relationship. So
Right.
we're still like in the process of figuring that stuff out because when you're so used to just kind of going along and doing what you're told and then you all of a sudden you have choice and the other person has choice and they may not be the same, then you got to advocate for what you want, what you believe, and then what you got to be able to listen to what your partner wants and then figure out what does that mean for the relationship itself because it isn't just about you, it's not just about them, it's about the both of y'all. Sorry, I cut you off. I don't remember where you were going. Sorry.
no, that's all right. That yeah. So we had a conflict, and I agree with you. By the way, good points. We had a conflict, and we kind of reached a point where like, well, and Sherry's really good at being able to like kind of articulate where she's at and where she's feeling things are at and all that. So we realized like we things had to change. We had reached a head wall, and like we have to make some changes and we have to make things work. And so we both had to kind of like write down where each of us is at, what each of us wanted and didn't want, and we kind of figure out, well, what are your deal breakers, what are your deal breakers, and
Hmm.
figure out where things are lined up, and then figure out, well, I know I'm here right now, but in my mind I'd like to be here or here, and maybe right here is would be good for right now. And we both kind of did that and then figured out how those things link up and sync up, and then we kind of like move forward with that as our goal and like kind of our map. And then as we made progress, we kept meeting and refining and talking about it and everything. um
Yeah.
I oh,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I don't remember a specific thing like I proposed to like very early on that was a catalyst though.
No, no, we just kind of came to a head, gotten a little, and then it was a long conversation, a lot of tears and all that, and it just kind of
Yeah.
went from there. I think the deal breaker language was new to us too. I think we had different language around it early on, but it was kind of like a to the autonomy and your own self advocacy, having that ability to say this is a deal breaker for me, and having to constantly revisit and be like, is this a deal breaker? Like,
Hmm.
is this really what I'm willing to end this over, or is it not actually a deal breaker, but it's like it's a big, hard, scary thing, but I'm willing to have conversations and willing to see what else might be an option, but this is how serious it is for me. Like it's very close to a deal breaker if it's not a deal breaker. And that would help us to realize where each other were on certain things. Like how close is that, how important is that? Because is it a deal breaker or is it like you're not sure if it's a deal breaker means it's very serious to them. So you better like think about how serious it is to you, your side of it. You know what I mean?
Right.
It was really empowering. I think it still is, though we don't use that. We don't need that language as
In the
much these
same way.
days.
I think too, like figuring out like some things might not be a fit right now, but we might be like that might be a fit in the future. It might be something we're working toward in some at some future like kind of like milestone type of point. But it's not a thing right now. But being clear about where you think things might be
Mhm.
versus being like, nah, that's a hard no, that's a hell no, not gonna happen. And then figuring out your hell no is not going to happen. Is it a problem for either one of us or is it not? And then the things that might be a no right now, like we know that's not a fit, or I know it's not a fit, or she knows it's not a fit, but potentially open to it in the future. Those are two different type of things. So I think that's the other thing. Like if there's, I think for us, I don't know that there was anything that was like a well, clearly there isn't because we still we're still together. There wasn't anything that was like a hell no, absolutely. That was a thing that either of us was a I need this to be what I want things to be satisfied and happy and all that. So we didn't have anything like that. So that was a major relief too in the sense of feeling secure because if that was the case, that
Mhm.
would have been a whole nother conversation. Because if
Yeah, I
one of
think
you is
that's
like an
huge.
absolute and the other one's like a hell no, what do you do? You know, that's not a
Yeah.
good thing.
Yeah, I think that's something I think that's probably what most people struggle with is like feeling like they need to either like justify their why or feeling like they need to kind of like be flexible in their boundaries, which like Sherry said, when you're in a relationship, it's not just about you, but it still is about you too.
Yep.
Like you want to make sure you're listening to your own voice and that what are you willing to compromise or is it going to be a sacrifice? And then especially dealing with like exploring your sexuality, when you talk about bringing other people in or even if it's just temporary, I think it can be a lot of emotions and feelings, and if you aren't doing the research, I think it's definitely going to be a tough conversation to have. So,
Yeah, that I think that's really important thing for people to like kind of pay attention to. Because I mean, even the idea of like, yeah, not trying to coerce someone past their boundaries or make them feel like
right.
their consent's being violated. I think it was helpful though to be able to like, even if someone, in our case, even if one of us was a hell no on something, to be willing to provide additional context of why they feel that way and all the things they're feeling involved, so that the other person at least feels heard and also so they have a clearer idea because I realized that even in our conflict at times we had been like talking about something in two very different ways, but it ended up being we were talking about the same thing but using different words for it. And if
Yeah,
we hadn't
that's
taken the time to
very
give
real.
that context, we never would have realized it and we would have had this conflict over something that we actually didn't have a conflict over, but we just used different words to kind of describe the thing or what we're feeling or whatever. So I think that's one of the things that's been helpful for us is being willing to give additional like our background context around stuff because then the other person feels heard and seen. It allows you to like express the full wealth of what you're feeling, and I think it lets you be seen more too by doing that. For me at times like it can be tough though because I'm like I don't want to be challenged on how I feel, yes or no, on something. Like
Yeah.
I'm feeling this kind of way. But so for me, it kind of like takes work in that way to not be defensive on that if she's asking for
1,000
additional,
questions.
yeah, questions. Not to take it the wrong way, like I'm being interrogated and I'm putting all these walls. I'm saying, nah, you ain't gonna push me, son. But
Yeah, that's definitely hard. Do you feel like there was a period, which I'm sure there was, but do you feel like there was a period in between, like coming out of their religious like time period, and then also like healing and like wanting to just find like just take a second, like take a breath before you jump into like the next thing, and like how did that, I guess, impact your ability to like want to jump into like anything else sexual after that?
yeah, it did take. I mean, it took a while to get out of the religious background. It took me from like I think I started my journey out in like restarted my journey out in like '07, and I didn't get out until like 2010. So that was a while. And then at that point, she ended up going on her journey out as well. I think no, because we kind of left around the same time. But I think
You
we
were
also,
waking up. You
yeah.
woke up a lot sooner than me.
And then we had to like grieve that too. We had to grieve the whole, because leaving that, we also grieved a lot of what we lost through being in it, like
Mhm.
all the experiences we didn't do because of being part of it. But then when we left, we lost a lot of family, friends, and all that. So we had to go through a transition time with that. But good old sex drive makes you still want it. Like if that's what, like if you still got that, and I had that, that motivated me to keep going on my exploration, because I was like, yeah, I
Yeah,
was
and I was
I was feeling all kinds of.
numb just from all the bullshit that I had gotten from the people in the congregation and the mistreatment and everything. I just kind of shut down, and I didn't realize even like 5 years out of the organization that I was still shut down until he was doing his thing and started bringing stuff to me, and then I was like, okay, what is happening? What is all this? What are you trying to do? But it was like at the same time as I was mad because I felt threatened. I was insecure. I was intimidated. I was worried. Like all of the things. I also saw a difference in him that I really liked, in the like standing up for his self and his own needs and things like that, bringing things he's learning into their relationship in the bedroom, and just even in our conflicts and how you would talk about different things. I had to like acknowledge all of the positives that was coming from the research he was doing that I thought was so scary and was going to be the end of us. But at the same time, I was so petrified that I was willing to end it, because it's kind of, I think looking back, I was in the mindset of like, we're going, or I should say, we weren't going in two different directions. I was like numb going straight, and he was going this way on his own. And I was like, he's going to leave me. That's it. So, yeah, I think it just kind of, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. What was the question?
Just kind of like dealing with the trauma, or dealing with, just needing to give yourself grace pretty much
Oh,
afterwards,
yeah.
and just needing time.
Yeah. So for me, it kind of went from the 0 to 100, because he had done all this. He was doing all the research on his own and all that kind of stuff. And it was actually that, well, I mean, a little bit before that, the fight of where we almost ended, where I was starting to like, okay, I got to do my own research and see where I can meet him on these things. But everything that I found online just made me feel even worse. I felt shitty. It's like, you can't control what your partner thinks about you. You can't control what your partner does with their own body and all this stuff. And I'm like, and you're right. And then it's, if you're with somebody like that, you should leave them and yada yada, to the point of like, he's gonna leave me because I don't get it. Like I'm not getting where he's at. So
Mhm.
it just made me feel really horrible. I'm like, I'm a horrible wife, I'm a horrible woman. Please don't do that. You're gonna make me emotional. But anyway, so
But she's not. She's dope. But
yeah.
I'll keep letting you talk.
Oh,
But I was like scared and gonna run away, and
yeah.
realized I didn't really want that. I wanted him. I just didn't know how to be on the same page with him.
Yeah.
I'm
And like
But we
I
sorry,
said,
figured
baby.
we figured it out.
I'm
yeah.
so sorry. I didn't mean to do that to you. I like, and I get where Sherry's coming from, but I was like, I had no intentions of dipping at all. Like, I was like, couldn't have been more happy being with her and all that. Like, she, as much as she's my ride or die, I've always been ride or die for her for life, no matter, like, I
I
wouldn't
know
even
that's
think
right.
twice about it. Like, you're gonna step to her, understand I'm gonna step in front of her. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what it is. It could be God. I'd be like, come on, check yourself home, because like I'm her ride or die. Like, so
Yeah.
like I was
And
from
I'm the fearful, fearful, whatever you call
fearful
it.
avoidant.
Yeah, like we're a weird combination, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to be like, in a lot of ways, I also wanted to be a better man and a better husband. And like a lot of the tradition we came from, I didn't agree with. Like, I wasn't feeling the whole headship thing and all of that. Like, because we, in so much of our life, we're partners, we're like co-collaborators, we're just like, and I didn't want to be like the tradition we came from was like the man is the head, what he says goes. And I never felt like that never connected for me. And so the whole sex positive community had such a different take on it. They were able to articulate stuff in a way that I felt inside, but I wasn't able really to articulate very well. And so like it gave me like different ways. That's why conflict was such a important thing for us, to be able to navigate conflict in a different way. Because like where we come up, like a wife has to just do whatever the dude says, and like for what reason? Like what about if there's a whole bunch of shit she's better at? Better educated, better skilled, all that. And in our case, there's a lot of shit she's better at than I am. So like we always like shared responsibility, and whoever was better at a thing did the thing. And so like coming into the sex positive space was like a breath of fresh air in that way. And it gave me better tools. It made it like better able to like, when you have a conflict, here's how you should do it. You should be fighting. If you are good in a relationship and you know it's a good thing for you and all those kind of like table stakes things, argue for your relationship. Yes, you need to express yourself and advocate for yourself, but you're also not looking to create an enemy out of your partner either. Like I think there's a Esther Perel title where it's like, do you want to be right or do you want to be married? And like I think there's a lot of like wisdom in that sentiment, and obviously every relationship's different, but for me that was like a lot of this was, it's so wild because it's like it's well beyond sex. It's a lot of stuff that helped me on an individual level, as a man, as a husband, and as a friend as well, that had literally nothing to do with sex, but it was the exploration of the sex side that like was like the catalyst for it. You know what I mean? That really helped.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know that I'm really explaining it the way it deserves, but
no, you're fine. So if you had to, I guess, give like a guide to exploring and then making sure that you're including your partner, how would you tell someone to go about it?
I think for me, I would say do the base level research and get yourself to a minimal amount of like understanding. So you understand how to communicate well with a partner, you understand consent, and you understand how to advocate for yourself. And ideally like do work on like your self-esteem and the shadow work stuff so that you can work on your own sexual shame. Because if you grew up in like a Western American culture, you definitely were influenced by a certain amount of sexual shame. Whether or not you grew up in religion doesn't really matter. Our culture is steeped in so much sexual shame. So I would do those things, because once you've done those things, you're better positioned to talk to your partner and come at it from a place of being positive. You'll be confident in yourself, and regardless of how they respond, you should be better centered. And then I think like for me, what worked was sharing a little bits at a time, over time, based on what either I was interested in or what I thought would benefit our relationship or benefit my partner. I think that worked for us. Obviously, it's a case-by-case basis for everybody, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like I shared stuff with her I thought she'd appreciate, or stuff that we were talking about or something like that. I try to like do the low stress, I wouldn't drop any big ass bombs out of the blue. That's for certain. I think that's like a recipe for probably disappointment. You know what I mean? I think you got to kind of roll it out like anything. Like if I think that's with anything. I can't give
we
a
were
good
talking
analogy,
about this last night too, and we were saying I think it really depends on where different people are in their relationship. Like as in our relationship, it seemed like I was at 0 and he was somewhere in, way up there. So he had to approach me with caution. So coming to me with like podcasts from like the therapist, like Esther Perel, and I don't forget some of the other ones, Justin Lay Miller, and different things like that, like science-based kind of research around sexuality, relationship type stuff, versus some of the other ones that did give me anxiety, like the Black sexuality and the like lifestyle and all those kind of podcasts.
I didn't hit you with King and Jasmine right off the rip.
But it was a mix of things.
Oh, we loved them though.
And then we'd we would just listen to tons of podcasts and we would talk about them a lot. So I think it just depends on like where you and your partner are, because some people, I mean, for us, we're probably like at zero, and for other people, they're starting way ahead of where we were. So like, how you
Mhm.
approach your partner depends on where they're at in their own sexuality, their openness to sex positivity, and different ways of thinking and different ways of doing things. What was the other thing I was gonna say? Oh shit, I forget. But I'll tell you when I remember.
Okay. I was gonna say, I think it's important to note. I know you guys said that when you left the religion, you lost a lot of friends and family, but I'm sure you've acquired more like open-minded friends now. And I think that it's when you are interested in exploring sexually, like to have those people around you, like to have that support system that's like, we've been there, we're trying to figure it out too. Like it's hard to to not compare yourself to them, like especially if they're where you're hoping to be as far as like openness or just even communication levels. But I think I like what you said of just kind of like meeting your partner halfway and like knowing how your partner communicates, knowing like, and I'm not gonna just be like, hey, I want us to having threesomes tomorrow, like be ready at the door. But
Exactly.
Yeah,
you know,
that's kind of where I was. What I was going to say too is, your partner's fears, their reservations, what might trigger them or make them back off. So approaching them and acknowledging their fears, like, hey, I know you feel this type of way about XYZ, but I was reading or listening to this podcast about whatever, and it got me thinking about XYZ, and then kind of opening the conversation that way, where you're acknowledging your partner's concerns and fears, but also you're coming to them with this because it's of interest to you for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think that, and
And it
then
doesn't feel like it's just your partner's like, hey, I want permission to do XYZ.
they're
right.
like, you haven't even considered
Yeah,
me, and you
yeah,
know
you're
how
not
I feel
considering
about
me.
XYZ. Yeah, I think that's gone a long way. And while I was just kidding with the King and Jasmine thing, because we're big fans of them. Like I was so
Yeah.
happy to finally meet them in person, like
Yeah.
in the same physical space. So that was really dope. Because I was joking when I was telling King, y'all been friends in my head for a very long time.
He's so down to earth,
Yo,
right?
he's
Like
really dope. That's one of the
so
reasons I
nice.
like him so much. Like, it's like, and I think that's where like what Sherry was saying about the black sexuality space versus a lot of the non-black sexuality space. It's
Hmm.
like some of the more dry academic versus like you get the cultural references. It's it's a different lane. It's a different experience, and obviously they're both wonderful and legit and all that, but like there's something on the black sexuality space that has fed us in a whole different way that has been so dope. And I mean stuff from like I keep mentioning them, I can never remember but their name, Wheezy and Mandy and
Horrible
horrible
decisions.
decisions and all that. Like there's stuff that like you could be completely opposite people to people, but then there's other stuff that just hits, it just lands. And I think that's been really dope. I think the sexuality space is cool because having people who are open minded is huge, like you were saying. I know, like, a lot of times, like, if you have friends who just aren't, you just can't talk about any of this with them, that's going to keep, I think, in a way, it encourages you to be more repressed and
Hmm.
it encourages you to kind of like hold on to elements of shame that aren't really serving you. You got to have, I think, you're definitely benefited by having at least some friends that you can continue to build a tight bond with who are open minded, who are sex positive. Even even if y'all ain't kicking it all the time, it's something. It's I noticed a difference. It's been definitely something that I've appreciated.
Yeah, I think it's literally a game changer because if not, I feel like you do feel silenced. You feel like you're right back in that kind of just like, I don't know, toxic area, toxic mindset.
Yep. I
Yeah.
absolutely agree with you. I
Yeah.
absolutely it was wild to go to Sex Down South and just be like what's his Courtney Brame had said, like
Hmm.
he's like my people. It's
Yes,
a
it
whole
really is
different
like a
vibe.
feeling like you're at home almost. Like, but
Yeah.
like I don't know, it's great. I think though it's interesting that you brought up, how like the different types of spaces, like one that's more like culturally diverse versus like a more white focused is I think that with the culturally diverse, a lot of the cultures that are like in those spaces hold on to like that similar like religious mindset of just like old school traditions. We don't question, we don't ask. This is what it is because they said so, and they just kind of go with it. So I think that's kind of maybe like an underlying tone of like where we can all relate to each other because like yeah, even though it might not have been as strict as a religion, it's like we are the people that went against what we were told and found like the better side of it, you know?
Oh, I
So
like that. We had a
yeah,
whole
that's
room full of people who had some rebellious streak in them and some
right.
strength too, because that is not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of fortitude to be able to be like, I'm gonna buck the trends and go my own way.
Right. So I do want to ask, what's I guess one thing each or two things each that you've discovered about yourselves, like since being able to explore your sexuality while being married?
From where I was to where I am. Like okay, so when we were dating, I was much more like free and open and more. I don't know. I don't know what the word is, but like I became over time, I became more repressed and shut down inside to the point where I felt kind of like dead inside, and
Yeah.
it was not a good space for me, which thus was not a good space for us. Being on this side, I feel like I'm in my 20s again. I feel like I'm ready. I'm dating. I'm like, babe, we're going on dates. Like, I want to date. We're gonna do all the things we didn't do because we didn't date without chaperones. When we first got married, he got sick. Then I got pregnant. Like, we missed out on so much stuff just in life that I'm like, it feels kind of like a whole new start. Like we get to date again and do all the fun things. And um, I just feel alive inside, and like I want to learn more. I feel like I'm leaning into like I want to know everything. I want to know all the things about all the stuff and find, like I said, I'll pick off that menu, like what works for us. What do we
Mhm.
want to do? What can we add to our life that's going to enhance? And it's just I feel like alive. Like I feel like free and alive and happy. And I feel like the closest I've ever been to him, even though we still have challenges, we still have those passionate discussions, you know. But yeah, it's been really wonderful on that side. And like I know I still got a long way to go. And you know, I can't wait to see where we are in just like another 5 years together and individually. And then on the other side, I realized a few years ago that I am bisexual. So that's been a fun and interesting thing as well to like discuss and explore and open my mind to. And I think just like accepting that and looking back to when I was young and realizing that I've always been that way, I just didn't know it.
Yeah.
I It's a whole nother part of like being free and feeling like a full ass person. You didn't even realize like you were blocking out this part of yourself that was always there.
Yeah.
So that's been amazing, and we're still learning and figuring all that stuff out too. But it's been great. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's been really cool. I think,
It's worth all the hard. It's worth all the hard stuff.
yeah, it's definitely been worth those like hard periods. Like, it, it's weird because I mean, a lot of it, I'm glad we went through it because what came out the other side, even though it was hard. I think for me, like, I look back and a lot of what I knew myself pretty well, even though, coming up, I was told, oh, those things are not important. You'll grow out of that. You're just immature, this, that, and the third. And now, being just right on the cusp of turning 50, I realized I did know myself really well. And a large percentage of those things I didn't outgrow. They're still important to me now. It's just that other people didn't value them. So I held on a lot. I developed a lot of shame around them and a lot of like self-consciousness. And so for me, I've like been able to let go a lot of shame. My self-confidence, self-image is dramatically improved. And I realized like, there was nothing to be ashamed about. There's nothing wrong with being like open-minded and being free-spirited. And there's nothing wrong with like how much you might love sexuality or how little if you're not feeling it at all. There's nothing wrong with that either. Um, so for me, it's like I more learned a different type of self-acceptance I never really had and wasn't really encouraged. And that's been really cool because it's been something that's I've been able to use it to kind of guide me and how I think about things, decisions I make. So that has been really dope. The other thing too for me is like our relationship. I was like, it's so wild because a lot of times people are like, oh, we're in a culture that very much encourages finding your person, getting married, and all that.
Hmm.
But to a point, because if you like them too much, then you're like, you're whipped or you're a simp or all these other things. And
Yeah.
so like I've always been how I've been, and people always had shit to say. They just always had shit to say. Like, and I finally got to a point where I'm like, fuck it, I don't care what you have to say. Like, how I feel today is how I felt 30 years ago, and that hasn't changed. And like, fuck you for saying differently. Like, all
Yeah.
the people who said, oh, this is gonna fade, you're gonna be XYZ, this is gonna damage you as a man or a husband. Like, well, they were wrong. They were wrong a long ass time ago. And that feels really good. But it's like, it feels good that I don't care anymore what they think, because
Hmm.
I'm like, I ride and I'm with her because I love her and care about her, regardless of whether other people support it, feel threatened by it, like it, hate it. It doesn't matter. Like, we've experienced the gamut of it, and at this point, I'm like, it doesn't matter. I'm not here for that reason. Um, and then I don't have any labels for myself or anything. I'm open minded. That's how I've kind of always tried to come at life. I've gone up and down and how open minded I allowed myself to be and following rules and all that. But I feel like I'm in a good spot now. I'm like, if I feel something, then that's good enough, and I'm cool with it. So that's I think those are like the high level or foundational things, I think.
Yeah, it sounds like you both give each other enough space to, feel safe enough to say like when you're interested or when, you want to try something new. But what would you say, like, how do you go about it if your partner is saying, like, no, this is like hard boundary for me. I'm not interested. I don't want to hear. I don't want to learn. How do you go about kind of what to do next?
That's a that's one of those like tricky ones for us. What we've done is come to agreement that I think one of the most important thing is you got to have the right to ask for pretty much anything. Say like the idea that nothing is off limits to ask or to say you're interested in or you would like. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean the other person is agreeing to do anything or even to entertain it, but you have to have the right to express what is inside of yourself to your partner. And at that point, then it's on the other person to say what they're feeling or not. And what we try to do is find some sort of something that might meet in the middle. If it's something that, like, if I want something and she's like, that's not going to work, well then she'll go back and she'll maybe think about it for a minute and see, well, maybe I know this isn't a thing, but maybe this over here might feel like it, or like, oh, I'm not interested in having a threesome, but maybe
There's
let's
something else
have,
that
yeah.
might give you the same
Yeah,
feeling, the same
exactly.
satisfy that same interest.
I think the wild thing about like even like the pandemic, we started seeing there's a lot of other ways to like do things and test things out that maybe like if you're not thinking creatively, you might not realize like, oh, you could have go to a sex show by watching one on Zoom, like, or what
Yeah.
what I'm saying, like not a sex show, a sex party. You could
Yeah.
attend a virtual sex party, or you could like talk to what do you call it, phone sex operator, or there's just so many different ways you can kind of like test out different things and different like kinks or interests or whatever that I mean, not saying or shaming that if someone wants to go to one in person or whatever, but there's a lot of different ways you can test stuff out. If
Yeah.
you're not feeling the one thing, maybe this is a different way or something like that. I don't know if I really fully
Yeah,
addressed
I
your
think you
question or
did. And
not.
I think, like, to the other side, if, like you were saying, you should have the right to ask for anything, but you also should have the right to say it's a hell no, or it's a, what do we call it?
Hard limit.
Deal breaker. If
Yeah.
something is a deal breaker. But then you should, if you're the one who's saying something is a deal breaker, try to like think about what is something that is close to what they're asking for that you would be comfortable with, and bring those ideas to the table. And then the person who's asking for the thing that is like a deal breaker for you should also be thinking about, well, what else like that or similar to that would satisfy that, whatever that thing is that they're looking for, and try to find somewhere to meet in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah. My husband and I are having conversations currently about like ethical non-monogamy and like what that looks like, how to approach that. And we were talking about the idea of, is it no right now or is it no forever? And if it's no right now, then we can revisit, or like you were saying, get creative with, how to approach it or something that's similar, or we'll scratch the itch, so to speak. So I definitely feel inspired.
Yeah, that's exactly. So I don't mean to. I'm sorry to cut
No,
you
you're
off.
fine. You're
When
fine.
you said that, that's exactly like our approach has been. Like we know the things that are no forever. Like I love that sentiment. I'm gonna steal that one. And then the things that we also are very clear on, the things that are like not a fit right now for whatever reason. And then like for us, we also made one of those spreadsheets, like the yes, no, maybe, and then something. I can't remember them all offhand, but we like
Like
filled
the
it up
kink
with a bunch of
one.
things. Yeah, like it
Yeah.
wasn't just limited. It was kink, but we decided we just put everything on it. So we just put a whole slew of stuff on it, and then just like mentally check off things, or like it's been cool because it's like it got us to see each other a little bit differently too, like
And see,
in a fun kind of
there's a
exciting
lot
way.
in between certain things that you might not think of. You think, oh, I want a threesome, but maybe it's something else might satisfy that same need or whatever, you
Right.
know?
Which has been really cool.
Yeah.
Like, so we just put a bunch of stuff on it, and it was fun, and it let us see each other a little bit differently. And it was like, it's kind of like a kinky kind of experience. And like, I don't know that.
Yeah, it also opens up a lot of conversations because the maybes and then where we're not on the same page with the yes and no, we talk a lot. We talk a lot about like different scenarios. Well, what if this was this and da. We create fantasy, we talk like fantasy out loud, and like just kind of try to make it real in your head when it's not actually really like it's not really a possibility right now because you know your partner is not down for it. But like, what if it was? And what if in the future this was a possible situation or scenario? And then it kind of just pulls out all of your fears on the person who's afraid of, like, you get all your fears out there in a safe way, and then the other person's like, but brings all the fun, joyous things, like the fun, awesome things that could be a possibility. And then before you know it, the person who's afraid is talking about all the fun things that could come of this thing too. And then the person who might be a no may become a maybe, and then you just never know.
Yeah.
And then that list was that list what also like what got me to start writing erotica and stuff too.
I
When we
don't
started
know.
doing that, I don't remember what problem. I know you encouraged me to write it because of all the interesting scenarios I used to always talk up. But yeah, that I think it came out of that, writing erotica and stuff, and then we just kind of like explore things through that. Was fun as well.
Yeah, that's one way for sure that I get to live my fantasies that he might not be down for, is I read it in a book.
Yep.
Yeah, that happened last night. I was reading, giggling, and he was like, "What are you reading?" So I let him read it, and he was like, "Oh," then he just handed me the book back.
That's what I do. I write all kinds of like erotica, and I just try to get mad spicy, and then I have fun either reading it to her or her reading it, and I just want to see the responses, and it's
Yeah.
fun. I like it.
I love that. I really love that y'all get creative. I love that you said you have an agreement in place. Without going like into detail, can you kind of tell me how that came about and like what it kind of consists of?
Yeah,
I think. Oh, sorry, am I
no,
jumping?
you can
I was
jump
gonna
in.
say I think it came from when we first started. When after that fight, and we're gonna start exploring things. I think it was like our check-in. We started with like, well, how do we check in with each other to make sure that we're okay, and how do we make sure that we keep having conversations and we're not just going and one person's like blocking out what's really happening, but we're actually having the conversations and making sure that each other is okay. So we started with, I think, the check-in.
It was the pleasure mechanics, right? It was. Did we get it?
No,
idea
but
from them?
there's a video on our YouTube, and there's a link in there wherever we first got it from. But again, going to the the open community, we got a lot of stuff. We pulled a lot from that for just our own exploration journey, and it helped us to have those conversations and use the right language on how to talk to each other, and yeah, those kind of things. So that's what we were saying. We're not in an open relationship, but we get a lot of skills from the open community. It's been awesome, and part of that is part of our agreement has a lot of the same concepts, because the exploration for us, especially on my side of things, it felt like that. It felt like opening up our relationship, even though
Yeah.
it wasn't. So yeah, that's where I think it's on one of the videos on our XO Fly Duo YouTube channel.
Okay.
There's some links in there to where we got, and they have some really good questions and templates, I think.
I was gonna say to what Sherry was saying too, like even if like somebody is opening up, I think a lot of these skills you got to learn them anyway to be successful in opening it up. So like even if we ever were thinking about that in the future, we'd still want to be doing the same things, and even if we never do, we still want to be doing these same things. So I don't think it really matters what the future goals are. Learning all the things that the non-monogamous community has shared on tools and techniques is valuable across the board. There's just so many things there. I think like we took a lot of the format from it, like, you know, we like in our check-in, and we haven't done it in a minute because we haven't need that. Like we keep evolving and then rolling with however we evolve to.
Yeah, we started. We were doing it every other day.
Yeah,
then weekly, then monthly, and now it's infrequent.
Yeah, and we do it differently now too, because it served us at the time. It served a really good purpose and it worked really well. But as you evolve, you got to be willing to like adapt to where you're going to and not be so regimented you stay to one thing, because that can kind of keep you locked in, and especially if it's not serving you well enough in the same way it served us then. Dope to have it, but now we're kind of like evolved into something different. But I don't remember. I wish I could remember all the people's info where it came from, but I know like we open ours up with like we have like some mantras in the beginning that different people had shared, like, you know, we're doing this in the spirit of preserving the relationship, understanding, listening to each other, you know, managing, you know, if we have conflict, think about the other person. Like we have a whole bunch of mantras that are in the opening that we used to go through every time. And then we had, I'm super prolific, like write everything down. So then we have a whole section with a shit ton of notes from all the previous agreements, which that got super ridiculously unwieldy, because like I would go through all of those every time. And at a certain point, we're like, why are we rehashing this thing from like, you know, 300 years ago? Like, why? This isn't helping us any. And then I don't remember what was in the other parts, because that part was like, that started becoming like pulling a 500-pound weight every time you open that thing up. I don't want to open it no more. I'm like, this thing's too, you know, I got my workout today. I don't need that thing anymore. You know what I mean? But I don't remember what was in the rest of it. What was, like checking in, asking about, you know, how the person's feeling, satisfaction with the relationship, satisfaction with themselves, satisfaction with, you know, the partner. A lot of questions
the ways
like
you agreed to handle things.
Oh yeah.
Handle conflict, handle disagreements, and things like that. Yeah.
And the agreement was to make it a space where anything could be said, and as long as how we say it, that was what mattered. It's like, how are you saying? Are you saying it to hurt the other person? Are you saying it to like share what you're feeling or need or what have you? And it was just a way to like check in and be very honest and all of that. I think we got to the point where we can do a lot of that without needing the like formal structure of an agreement conversation, like the relationship agreement conversation. Now we can have those conversations just kind of off the cuff when we need to, or when we're feeling some kind of way, and we still have it, we just haven't used it in the same way. And it's not that I'm like do as I say, not as I do. It's more just like I think we've kind of evolved to a new process. Maybe that'll become part of the process again at some time in the future, but right now what's working is working. So
yeah, nice. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I feel like I've had a therapy session, but I've learned so much. I'm about to steal the agreement and go look up the YouTube video after this.
oh, word.
Yeah, I've seriously enjoyed talking to you guys. I love your content. Especially I know you guys don't do them as often, or at least it doesn't come up, but when you were doing like the news articles, because so much of it's censored or like filtered down, it's hard to find, but I was always informed. So I sincerely appreciate your content, and
Oh
I'm
no.
excited for what's next. So what is next actually? What's coming up?
Well, I loved hearing you say that. Like that, I know that like because we loved doing the Sex in the News. It was because we run another full-on whole business like our brand agency. It can be
Mhm.
really time consuming. So we're constantly like having to look at what we're doing on the sex tech and chill side and make hard choices on what we can't sustain in the moment.
Right.
So Sex in the News is one of those things we just couldn't sustain.
We're
Um,
moving it to a monthly newsletter, which will be
Oh, nice.
hopefully launching within the next few months.
yeah, and then it'll just be via email. So if you're interested in that, go to sextechandchill.com, sign up, get your email in there, and then when we roll that out, you'll get part of that. We do a live stream on LinkedIn, the fireside chat, and where we talk with people across the spectrum of the pleasure industry. It's like a wide industry, and we kind of it's an intersectional conversation. I know that's not actually the true meaning of intersectional, because I definitely with Kimberly Crenshaw, I definitely understand what intersectional is. But anyway, so I should use a different word. It's a conversation that like is at the intersect of people's professional life, their personal life, and then the implication, the culture, and the like political, social implications of things. And so we have conversations that realm around that. And then in the very near future, I'm going to be rolling out a short little set of like IG lives, and I'll be talking with a lot of folks about the intersection, similar conversations, but not exactly the same, and more like culture focused and less business focused. And I'll be rolling those out. So just keep in tune with Sex Tech and Chill on IG or LinkedIn or the website, and we'll roll that out.
Mhm, Yeah, we also have an article coming out next week about our experience at Sex Down South, because this was our first in-person experience, like full experience. We attended I think the last few virtually during the pandemic.
And then 2 years ago, we went to the keynote that Amina did.
Yeah, but
And
this was like our first multi-day. We stayed at the hotel, even though we live right near here, and yeah. So we have an article coming out about that experience, what that was like too.
Nice. Super exciting. I love Sex on South. I bought my ticket for next year while I was there. It's like
oh, that's
I
so
can't
dope.
wait to come back. But yeah, I've really loved talking to y'all, and I'm going to make sure to put all your contact information in the show notes. But can you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Absolutely. I'll let you take this one.
Sure, sure. Okay, so if you want more of our journey and our experience and to hear about all of that, we have a YouTube channel, XO Fly Duo. We have links to a bunch of other appearances and podcasts and stuff that we've done on xoflyduo.com. You can find all the sex tech and chill stuff at sex tech and chill on Instagram and LinkedIn, and sextechandchill.com. And then if you are a pleasure professional of any sort or in the industry and you need help with your branding or websites or any kind of digital experience design or anything like that, you can find us at flymediaproductions.com.
Nice. Awesome. I didn't know y'all did. I knew about your media company, but I didn't know it was um for like people in the sexuality industry. So good to know.
yeah,
But yeah.
sorry. Didn't mean to
No,
cut you
you're
off.
fine. I was gonna say I could use you. Um, but yeah, is there anything you guys want to say to our listeners before we close out?
Yeah, I love that you're having these conversations. I so appreciate it. Like, I think it's really cool to see this new wave around sex positivity, because I think there's additional conversations that are being had now, and I think it's really powerful. I was reading a stat that's talking about, like, in line with kind of like our background, millions of people are leaving, are becoming ex-evangelicals. Millions of people are leaving various restrictive communities and like traditions, and they're finding themselves in these really challenging spaces. And how do I move forward? And I want to learn, I want to like enjoy, but it's like a lot. And I just want folks to know, like, you are not alone. There are millions of people doing this. And, dive in and where you're comfortable and just keep learning. It will get a hell of a lot better. And on the other side, I know, like, being a man, a lot of dudes like don't want to be problematic. They don't want to be that problematic, toxic dude. They don't want to be an asshole. They want to be a either better version of themselves, or they just want to find other men who are doing things differently. There's a lot of great information out there, and I know it seems like a lot of the problematic stuff is the stuff that's platformed everywhere and it's the most amplified and visible. And I agree, it is the most visible shit, but there's a lot of great resources out there for guys to either you want to just be a better person, or if you are with a woman, you want to be a better partner to her. Just keep looking, keep finding it. We have some resources. There's other folks. King Noir is a great guy who has a lot of good content. Courtney Brame is another guy. There's I don't want to just limit to that. Justin Lay Miller. I know. There's
Pleasure Mechanics
yeah.
is a great place to start. Like, they're very gentle about a lot of this stuff. They were very easy on me. So I always recommend them. It's a great, great place to start.
And I think if you're a guy too who is with women, follow a lot of women like Hoeology Podcast. Follow a lot of their content, because if you're someone who's with women, it's great to learn from women in addition to the learning you can do from men. Like, because if you enjoy being with women, hear right from the source, like, listen to what they're saying. Like, they're very transparent about what they want, what they like, what they need, what they appreciate, and on the other side of the equation, what they don't like, what they don't want, what they don't need. Like, there's no one who can tell you more than that, than as far as enjoyment and needs, than women. So, like, I think for guys, be open to learning from a lot of women in addition to the guys that you're listening to as well. I think Hoeology Podcast is a great place for you to start. I'm being serious, even though I'm just clowning, but no, it's for real. Podcasts like yours, I think more dudes should be listening and paying attention if they're not already.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I actually have a couple of people that are like older that reach out to me too, and they're like, "Oh, I learned something from your podcast." So I agree. People are definitely starting to wake up and smell the roses.
Exactly, absolutely.
And I was gonna say too, if you're in a similar situation to where we were, where you're having a hard time getting on the same page with your partner, keep trying. It's worth it. It's a lot of hard emotional work, but it is so worth it. And the benefits, like, I can't even, y'all, don't make me emotional again. I promise it's worth it.
Yeah, it is hella worth it. The benefits are astounding. It change your whole goddamn life.
Yeah.
Change your whole world.
Nice.
And sometimes, it's stuff you could never even have imagined, like, that good change.
Sweet. Well, again, thank you so much for meeting with me today. And that's all we have. Happy hoeing.